Hello friends, followers and channel members, welcome to a really exciting video today here in Microsoft Flight Simulator, where we will be taking a look at the newly released Vnav in the A320NX experimental build from FlyByWire. Now of course Vnav has been probably the most sought after feature since the FlyByWire's A320NX release. It has been a lot of hard work to get it to this stage, and it is still not yet 100% complete and accurate. However, it is, from my personal testing, more than just usable. In fact, I found it to be pretty good. So on this video we're going to show you how this works both in the climb phase, how the managed descent works, and we're going to talk about a few little gotchas that you do need to watch out for, partly because of some things that aren't quite yet working correctly in the sim, and partly because VDev in itself is a really big topic, and there are lots of different modes that the Airbus can fly in, and if you don't understand these modes correctly and fully, then things can start to go wrong very quickly, which you may believe to be a fault with the aircraft, but actually may be pilot error. We're going to show you how to avoid all of those and completely understand all the different modes available and what will and won't work. So here we are set up for a departure out of Birmingham's runway 15. What I'm going to talk about first is all the different things that you can see on the navigation display. You'll see when you've popped in your standard instrument departure, you may see a few things like little blue arrows, little magenta arrows, and pink magenta circles. So we're going to have a little look at those. Before we do that, however, we need to give the aircraft as much information as possible in order for it to work out how it is going to fly in managed climb mode. And one of the first things we need to do is check out the constraints on the chart and ensure that they match up with the constraints that we've got on our flight plan. So here you can see the standard instrument departure that we're going to be flying today. We can see there are some speed constraints, but also some altitude constraints as well. If we flip through these, we want to make sure that, as you can see here at Bravo Bravo Echo 12, there is a constraint shown here at flight level 60. If we check that against the chart, we can see that is the upper constraint just there, and at Bravo Bravo Echo 19, there is also a mandatory constraint that we have to be at flight level 60 at that point. They all look to be accurate, and so it means that the information that the flight computer has been given is correct. If these are not correct, then it means that the Vnav and the constraints won't work correctly. Now let's have a look at the navigation display, and the first thing you'll notice in this new version is there is some new information being displayed. You'll see we've got a little magenta arrow on there, as well as a little magenta circle. Now, what do these mean? Here is the standard instrument departure that we're going to be flying today. As you can see, there are max speed limits of 210 knots on here, and of course if you've got the constraints turned on up on the EFIS, they will also be displayed on your navigation display, and we can see those matching up quite nicely. So Birmingham 02, 04, 06, 246, we can see those all match up at 210 knots. Now the little arrow, the little magenta arrow, what this means is this is the position on the flight route where the aircraft will level off at the constrained altitude entered in the McDo. The managed climb mode, however, must be engaged for this altitude constraint symbol to appear and for it to be honoured. If you flew the departure in either open climb mode or VS mode, then the constraints are not honoured. If we go up to the flight control unit, the FCU, and if I start to increase this, if I pop that to 5,000 feet, bearing in mind, of course, as we look, 5,000 feet is okay at Bravo Bravo Echo 12, it's also the minimum at 16, then if I then push that into managed mode, you'll see that it's now changed from magenta to blue. This is the position where the aircraft will level off at the FCU selected altitude. And of course the FCU is here, the flight control unit, set to 5,000. So if we now increase the altitude that I've got showing here on the FCU above 6,000 feet, so it would, if we left it in open climb and not managed climb, it would basically bust the 6,000 feet constraint that we've got on the chart. So let's go ahead and pop in 7,000 feet, and what we should see is that turn to magenta. There it is. It's turned to magenta because it's telling us that that is where the constraint is. The aircraft, if it is left in managed mode, will level off at 6,000 feet here until it passes the waypoint Bravo Bravo Echo 19. After that, it will then continue to climb up to 7,000 feet. Let's go back to the navigation display then and just have a little look at that magenta ball that I mentioned earlier. This is essentially the speed change marker. This indicates a point where the aircraft will initiate an automatic acceleration or deceleration from its current speed. Now the reason it is shown here is because this is the point at which that 210 knot speed constraint ends. So at that point we would expect the aircraft, in managed speed of course, to start accelerating away towards 250 knots below 10,000 feet. You'd also then of course get another acceleration at 10,000 feet up to its cruising speed. In order for Vnav to work correctly, or more accurately in an Airbus for managed climb and managed descent to work correctly, the aircraft needs to know what the en route wind speeds are going to be. Until now, we've not been too concerned about this, and all we've had to do is on the init B page just enter the trip winds, either a overall tailwind or headwind, which we would do as shown just here. But now that Vnav is working on the init A page, we have the ability to add in the en route winds on the wind and temperature page. As you can see here, we have the climb wind, we have the cruise wind, and the final phase we have the descent winds. Now the descent wind is the most important to ensure you get an accurate top of descent. So we're going to go ahead and enter our descent winds, and we can find these on the operational flight plan. So first of all, we're going to put in the heading, which is 313, and then the wind is at 034 at an altitude of 50390. So they're the winds in at that altitude, and of course you can go in and you can pop in the winds for all of these if you wish, which if you've got a nice long cruise, this gives you something to do. I'm going to leave that one for flight level 35, 31, 200, etc., but we are going to enter in the winds for flight level 100. So let's go ahead and put that in, which is 310 at 034, and we don't need to enter the flight level for there, because as you can see it's already filled in green for us. So just go ahead and enter that. So there it is. That has given the flight computer the information it needs to give us an accurate top of descent for our flight. Let's have a look at another example of this departure out of Manchester. So this is the Samba Departure, Samba 1 Romeo, and as you can see from the chart here, the constraint is at Samba, we need to be at 5,000 feet. Okay, so at the moment I have got the FCU set to 5,000 feet, so we should see us leveling off, meeting that constraint at 5,000 feet for Samba. And as you can see at the moment, it tells us that we're going to be at 5,000 feet at where the little blue level off arrow is shown. If we again show you that putting at 6,000 feet, again in managed climb mode, you'll see that that little arrow turns to magenta because it's a constraint. We can't go any higher than 5,000 feet in managed mode. Of course, we would also want to check before departing that these constraints were also shown here in the flight plan page on the McDo, and of course, as you can see there, they are. So then, let's say that we're actually going to select flight level 190, and again in managed mode. So we're in climb mode, and we still have the magenta top of climb constraint of 5,000 feet shown just here. That's where we're going to hit 5,000 feet. It's not going to allow us to go any higher than 5,000 feet until we pass Samba. If I now zoom out to show you where Samba is, we then get a different kind of symbol, and that is a blue arrow pointing up. And the blue arrow pointing up symbol is the position where the aircraft will start start to climb with climb mode armed, and climb mode would be armed at that point as we begin the climb up to 19,000 feet, flight level 190, as that is what we had selected in the FCU. If I now just unpause this, the aircraft should continue to fly. It will have a little moment, of course, as the simulator rights itself following active pause, and you can see we've got alt constraint being shown because that's going to level off at 5,000 feet because of that constraint at Samba. Now, as you can see here, we're turning towards Samba, and suddenly I am no longer at 5,000 feet. The reason for that is I changed the QNH from the local QNH to standard. FlyByWire have said that there is an issue at the moment in the experimental build. Remember, of course, this is the first time that their Vnav has been rolled out into the Airbus, so you do need to be aware that there are going to be certain occasions that bugs come in. The fact that it doesn't take a change to standard pressure into account is something that you really need to be aware of and can be considered quite a large threat. What I would do in this instance then to make sure I'm at the right altitude is I would pull open climb and set 5,000 feet. In doing that, we should then be able to see we're going up back to 5,000 feet, or flight level 50 now, as we continue in open climb mode. Once I'm there, I can then pop it back into managed mode as we get towards Samba. After that, we can then set our higher climb, and you will see that the aircraft will continue to climb as we pass Samba, as long as you've popped the aircraft back into managed mode. If we do that now, we should see Alt star, we're back into managed mode, and once we capture 5,000 feet, this should turn to Alt, and then once we get past Samba, that should arm the climb mode, and we'll go up to flight level 190. If I go ahead and set this now, there we go, so climb mode is armed. We've got the altitude constraint at the moment, and in around 5 miles time we'll continue a climb up to flight level 190, and we can also see the level off point as well showing just there. That is when we should expect to reach flight level 190. So there we go, we've just started to pass Samba. The modes have changed, thrust climb and climb, and we're now on our way up to flight level 190. And again, if I zoom out, we should be able to see where the top of climb will be reached. We can also see a speed change, so that is where we would expect to reach flight level 100, 10,000 feet. That is where I would expect the aircraft then to start accelerating away to its cruising speed. So if I now look a little bit further ahead on the navigation display, you can see that I've got the top of descent arrow showing just here. Short flight today as we're coming into London Heathrow's 09 left from Manchester. Of course, we will go through now and check that all of the constraints in the arrival match up with the constraints that we've got both on the chart and in the flight plan page. So if we just bring the charts up for my arrival into London. So here are the charts for my arrival, which begins at Honolly. We need to be at flight level 150 at Soppit, and then flight level 70 at Bovingdon. Again, if we just scroll through, we should be able to see that they're all coded in correctly, and if not, of course, we can then go in and edit them. We can see we've got Soppit flight level 150, and then Bovingdon we should have flight level 70. Now you'll notice that it has a amber asterisk next to it, and on the navigation display it has an amber circle around it. This is a warning to tell you that in the current configuration that this constraint is going to be missed. If I have a look here in the Bovingdon constraint page, you can see that 7,000 is set, but because it has the amber asterisk next to it and on the navigation display it has an amber circle around it, it's telling me that it expects to miss the constraint and we're probably going to be too high. So we're now happily at the cruising altitude, and one of the things that we're going to need to do prior to starting our arrival is, of course, we want to get the weather, put that into the performance page, as the McDo will remind you. There you go, we can see we've got enter the destination data. This is, of course, as important as always to fill in this field, but one of the other things you're going to have to do is make sure you've taken a look at your flight plan page to ensure that it is all sequenced correctly. Let's just have a quick look at that. If we zoom back in and scroll through the flight plan page, we want to check that the arrival looks as we would expect it to. And if it doesn't, then you need to keep a real eye on that top of descent and the rate of descent in terms of its vertical deviation from the descent profile. As you can see here, it doesn't look too clean and tidy, but that is purely because, as you'll know from watching live streams and also from flying the aircraft yourself, there are occasions where it cannot compute the accurate flight path, and that is because it is trying to make you fly this particular route all at a speed of 290 knots. Of course, you wouldn't be able to do that, so it adds in some extra sort of vectors, if you like, to try and get down in time. The moment you start to reduce the speed, this will all tidy itself up, but because there's still this little bug within the fly-by-wire system, you're going to have to actively monitor that vertical descent profile yourself. As nice as having top of descent markers are, it's still something that I would want to be double checking and monitoring all the way down to make sure I'm not left high and dry. If you've put in the wrong VIA or initial approach fix and you've got a real mess of an approach shown just here, then you essentially are going to be telling the aircraft you're going to be flying lots of extra track miles. Well, if that is the case, that means that your top of descent is going to be later than you actually need, and that is because it thinks that you've got all these extra track miles to fly, which really you don't. Your airport is a lot closer track mileage wise than the route that you've got programmed in. So it is really, really important, if you're now using the new Vnav systems in the fly-by-wire, that you actively monitor the descent profile to make sure it's accurate, and 2, make sure that your flight plan is sequenced correctly. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself starting that top of descent far, far too late and then struggling to get down. Okay, so I have just paused the simulator using active pause. We're at flight level 190, and as you can see, we're just a little under 20 miles away from where we're going to begin our descent. But I just wanted to show you a couple of things with the Vnav and the Airbus system, or the managed descent system, to try and stop anything going wrong and coming up with some scenarios that you may not anticipate. So if we now decided to start our descent early, let's say air traffic control have told us to begin our descent now down to flight level 150 and to be level by SOPIT, we could do that, of course, and if we pop that into managed mode, so let's set 150 on the FCU and we pop that into managed mode, we're actually starting our descent early. So if we push there, what will happen is, of course, the aircraft will go into descent, and if we unpause the sim, we'll start to head down. Now, of course, this means that we are going to be getting below the profile because we are starting our descent early. If you start the descent early, the aircraft will descend you at a nice shallow rate of around 1,000 feet per minute. And as you can see, Fly-by-Wire have nailed this on as well. We're descending 1,000 feet per minute, and you can see the little green dot, which is affectionately called a yo-yo. The little green yo-yo is our profile, and as you can see, we're getting below that quite neatly now, because that wouldn't start to move until we passed the top of descent marker. So what happens if we're in a nice steady managed descent, 1,000 feet per minute, and at the moment everything is being managed for us, our speed, our flight route, and of course our descent down to flight level 150. Let's say that air traffic control have told us that we need to deviate left by 20 degrees or so for traffic or traffic spacing. The moment we come out of nav mode, then we can no longer use managed descent, and I'll show you what I mean. Let's pull out of that, and we go into VS 1000 and into heading mode. I don't know if you heard, there was also the 3 clicks there telling us that the modes have changed. The reason for this is the aircraft now can no longer be accurate in telling us what profile we need for our descent. Essentially, you put the aircraft into heading mode it now no longer knows where you are actually going to be heading. You're deciding the direction, not the computer. You're no longer flying the pre-calculated route. If you're not flying the pre-calculated route, how can the aircraft expect to know where it needs to be at what altitude? So you cannot fly a managed descent in anything other than managed mode or nav mode. So let's pop that back into nav, at which point I can then push that back into managed descent mode. Let's take a little look at something else then. So obviously you can descend in three ways: managed descent, open descent, or of course VS. If we pull VS and we start to just shallow off that rate of descent, what we should see is the blue line start to move away, the little blue level off arrow. And as you can see, that blue arrow has now actually disappeared, and it has been replaced by what looks like a little white zigzag line. That is the point at which the aircraft would intercept the pre-planned descent profile. In this case, what you would expect to see here on the altitude tape is at this point here, that is where the green yo-yo starts to come down, and it would meet us at this particular point. From there on, you can then use the green yo-yo to try and keep up with your descent, of course, if you're in VS speed, or you could of course make it easy and just go back into managed descent. But if we just let this run for the next 5 miles or so, what you should start to see is the yo-yo or vertical deviation start to come down and meet us around about where the aircraft meets the little white squiggly line. You can also see, of course, that as we're now reaching 15,000 feet, flight level 150, if I just continue that descent down and leave it in a VS of 500 feet per minute, as predicted, that is where the green yo-yo is coming, and here is our descent profile. If we now pushed for managed descent, the aircraft would be constrained at flight level 150 because of the constraint we had at SOPIT. However, now we've passed that, we're cleared to descend further, and our next constraint, according to the chart, will be flight level 70 at Bovingdon. Those of you flying the experimental version will perhaps also have noticed the Magenta speed gates that you can see on the speed tape. These are set to 20 knots above and below your normal target speed. If you're high on the profile, it'll accelerate up to this upper gate to try and catch up with the profile, and of course if you are low, it'll then slow down to the lower gate to reduce your VS rate. A quick way to check your vertical deviation as well is on the progress page. It'll show you if you are too high or too low. So in this case, I'm currently about 4,200 feet above the vertical profile. However, as we can see from the navigation display, the blue intercept point is showing that we're going to meet the profile just before Bovingdon. So there's little need for concern, and everything hopefully should all work out okay. But it's always worth monitoring your profile manually, just the way you always have done prior to Vnav being released. At 10,000 feet, I want close to 30 miles to run, perhaps a little bit more, so I've got time to slow down. So we're passing 10,000 feet now, and if we come down and check the track mileage, I've got 36, 35 now track miles to run. So everything's doing okay, particularly as we're already at a slow speed. I've now just activated the approach phase, which means the aircraft will level off a little bit just to lose some speed. Because we've leveled off for a few seconds to lose speed, you'll see that intercept point has just jumped a little bit further down the line, but we've still got plenty of track mileage to run, and we're going to intercept it in good time for a nice approach into London Heathrow. The rest of the approach then can just be flown as you always have done. Here you can see we're just about on the base turn, the glide slope is coming up, we're going to get configured with flaps 1 and then of course flaps 2 prior to intercepting that glide slope. And other than that, the fly-by-wire team, so far as I can see, have done a remarkable job at the first implementation of Vnav. Now there are still lots of things to add to this, and so what I would recommend is, if you can, try and catch one of our live streams using the new experimental build of the FlyByWire A320NX, as every single approach is going to be different. So in order to gain your confidence with it and to use it more accurately, then if you can try and catch some of the live streams that we're going to be doing with this, then that's probably going to be one of the best ways is sort of see it working in a live case scenario rather than just a little tutorial video such as this. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you have found this video tutorial of some use, and if you do have any further questions or you're experiencing any issues, then please do leave comments down below and I'll try and get back to you. I'd be very interested to hear what you guys think of the new Vnav implementation, and of course we have to say an absolutely huge thank you to the FlyByWire team for continuing to work on the Airbus A320NX. It really is simply amazing the amount of detail that these guys are getting out of this aircraft, and of course all for free as well. Please do hit like on the video if you've enjoyed this video and found it useful, and of course do remember to hit that subscribe button and turn on that notifications bell if you're new to the channel so you don't miss future live streams and future video content. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Bye bye for now.